Councillors, if I may, I will need to open proceedings because the chairman appointed by Councillor Bunting has already given apologies, and therefore we will need to elect a chairman from the committee who are present tonight. Can I have a proposition, please, and a second?
Can I propose that we have Councillor Orca as the chair? However, can I have it noted, please, that I think this committee should have a deputy chair for this very eventuality going forward. Thank you. Noted.
Well, second. Second. Anybody in disagreement? All in agreement? All in agreement. Thank you very much.
Sorry, thank you.
That's all, but you're in the chair.
I take it there's no speech or anything like that.
No, I'm afraid
not.
No effective speech.
You have to wear a tiara.
Okay, thank you very much. Welcome, everyone. The first item on the agenda is minutes. Hopefully you've had a chance to review those of you that were at the previous minutes. Are there any concerns or worries, or can we sign them as a true record of the meeting? Yes. Okay. Okay, apologies for absence. I have apologies from Councillor Bunting and Councillor Parker. I was looking through the committee list and everyone else is present. So
there's also apologies from Scott Peasland, who's the internal audit manager and generally attends the meetings.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. Yeah, before we move into the rest of it, it's just a welcome really to everyone who's new to the committee. This is my second year. Pritchard, welcome. Yeah, Pritchard, yeah. Welcome to the committee, and Question Nickel, White, yeah, White, and Fabian, welcome to the committee. Hope you enjoy stuff. Good, thank you. Any members' interests? No. All right, so we move into the substantive part of the meeting, item 4, which is to resolve that the annual audit review 2015 and 16 and the control issues raised in the report be acknowledged in support of the Council's annual governance statement. I'll hand the time over to Tony.
Thank you. I am taking this report. It's Scott Peasland's report, the internal audit manager. In his absence, I'll do my best to present it. The report is an annual review. It's a backward-looking report for 15-16 and is part of the requirements of the public sector internal audit standards. And it provides an opinion on the overall adequacy and effectiveness of the organisation's governance, risk and internal control environment. I'll just draw out some highlights from the report, and if there's any questions, we'll take those later. 4.3, table 4.3 on page 10 of the papers, sets out our resourcing and our productive time. 4.4 tells us that there have been 2 occasions of vacancy during the year. We had 2 vacancies for the same post as senior internal auditor, which has cost us some staff time during the course of the year. We had a very good senior internal auditor who was poached from us shortly after the time of this, which is the reason we've been through 3 in 1 year. We now are up to a full complement of staff, which is 3.22 full-time equivalents for the audit service, and that has been in a full establishment since January this year. 4.5, we've completed 42 of the 45 audits in the 15-16 plan. The 3 which remain uncompleted are shown in the appendix, and these have been reconsidered for the 16-17 audit plan. At 4.7, reference to customer feedback from stakeholders, and the message there is it continues to demonstrate that internal audit is providing an effective service which is valued by management and members, and does go on to provide some commentary from KPMG, our external auditors, and the reliance they're able to place on the work of our internal audit team. Then move on to the public sector internal audit standards performance improvement plan. The self-assessment against the standards has been undertaken, and that's set out in Appendix B to the papers, which give details of those areas adjudged non or partially compliant, together with actions forming the improvement plan for the current financial year. Moving on then to section 5, which is the opinion on the overall adequacy and effectiveness of the control environment. As you see in 5.2, it is the internal audit manager's opinion that the overall adequacy and effectiveness of the council's control of environment for 2015-16 is assessed as giving substantial assurance. And moving on to page 12. I'm looking at the table there under section 5.5. This sets out the assurance opinions and some of the performance data over the past 4 years. Excuse me. And you can see for 15-16, which is the right-hand column at the table, the audits undertaken this year, 17 has received full assurance, 15 substantial, 8 limited and non-minimal assurance. The target ratio splits of full substantial against limited minimal, we've actually come right back on the targets, that's an 80-20 split there. Percentage of agreed recommendations implemented that are categorised as high priority, 91% against a target of 90%. And the percentage of all agreed recommendations implemented, the committee haven't set a target on that, but we're reporting 88% on that particular indicator. So you see that the targets have been met for 15-16, met or better for 15-16. Moving on then to 5.8. During the current financial year, no audits have received minimal assurance. 3 audits of corporate significance have been completed, which are worthy to bring into the attention of this committee. Details of 2 were provided to the committee in January, but the summary of those are set out in the papers. I'll just give a very brief highlight of those, particularly for new members of the committee. Corporate health and safety received a limited assurance. However, significant progress has been achieved in a short space of time since that. A follow-up audit has been undertaken, and which allowed sign-off for the successful completion of every recommendation, giving a revised audit opinion of full assurance. And in the words of the internal audit manager, management shall be commended for the prompt action. Moving on then to IT disaster recovery. This was assessed as being of substantial assurance. There were a couple of issues there at the time of the audit. One relating to the lack of a formal contract in place for disaster recovery arrangements. And that has since been put right. And subsequently a 3-day IT recovery rehearsal has taken place. And the lessons learned from this exercise will feed into a further recovery test. The completion of the testing has allowed a revised audit opinion of full assurance. Moving on then to the third one, which is new to the committee. This wasn't reported last time. Information management and records management. And I need to correct the information there. Information management was a substantial assurance, is substantial assurance, and records management is actually a limited assurance, not substantial. That's an error in the papers there, so apologies for that. The information management side of things, there have been improvements observed by audit over the last 3 years, and internal audit recognised the continuing improvements there. I think the area just to dwell on for a moment is the records management, which has received a limited assurance. the internal audits are concerned that not all service areas have developed a disposal and retention schedule reflective of the expectation within the policies. So not all areas of the business are meeting those expectations. They particularly have identified the issue of data classification and the lack of a data classification system appropriate to the organisation. That in turn has caused some issues in terms of disposal and retention. If we're not able to classify our data, then how do we know what we're disposing or retaining, or how we treat that? So that's the particular area of concern. The report was considered by the senior management team meeting at its April meeting, and it was determined by senior management team that the risk management working group should have a look at that particular issue. That the risk management group was subsequently met and have taken oversight of that issue, and we're working now to develop a local data classification scheme, so one that's fit for purpose for us as an organisation, and we'll report back on that in due course as our work progresses. Finally, in terms of audits and the audit review, there are no outstanding issues with regards to the matters raised in last year's annual audit review and the corresponding annual governance statements. Then move on to the review of the council system of risk management. This committee is excuse me, is responsible for an oversight of the council's risk management arrangements, and to that end received a report in January, including the proposed reassessment of the strategic risk register as part of its consideration through to strategy group and council for approval. There were some changes or some challenges put by the committee in January in respect of the council's risk appetite, and we'll pick those up later in the agenda with a risk management report. So those have fed through into the officer working group, but this committee endorsed the work going through on the strategic risk management, which was duly approved by council. Just move on then to section 5.14. Again, as part of the risk management, the internal audit work, at each audit there's an assessment of service risk registers as part of that audit work. The overall assessment of the results indicate that risk registers generally provide adequate coverage, with only a few instances where we've identified additional risks or management considerations. And evidence of review from monitoring tells us that these arrangements are effectively in place across the council, again with only minor improvements being raised. So that essentially is the report. Just quickly run through the conclusions. Section 7 on page 17. 7.1, from an internal audit perspective, the team continues to provide an effective service. 7.2, internal audit has been able to provide a substantial assurance opinion to council's control environment, and no minimal assurance opinions given, and both assurance indicators being met for the second year running. Comments from the Deputy Chief Executive on behalf of the senior management team at the bottom of page 17. Members can take confidence from the assessment of substantial assurance for the effectiveness of all control systems within the council. However, members can be assured that this does not lead to complacency and is recognised that there is still potential for improvement. In last year's review, it was identified that it was appropriate to focus on developing a robust counter-fraud strategy for 15-16. Progress was duly made, and we'll pick up the fraud work in a later report. So if I can then just take you back to the advice. On page 9 of the papers, we're asking the committee to resolve the annual audit review for 15-16. The control issues raised in the report were acknowledged in support of the council's annual governance statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you. Councillor.
Thank you. A couple of things. On the table on page 12, table that relates to section 5.5. The clarification, 2015-16 limited, that should now be 9 in actual fact, is that correct?
I believe the stats are correct. I think it's just a typo in terms of that particular audit.
Right. That's point number 1. Perhaps that is correct. Just need to go and double check. A quick point on there, actually. In terms of the number of audits each year, I know we have them in the text. Might it be helpful actually to have the just the summary at the bottom, so we can make an easy comparison? So actually, you have the number of audits, and then beneath them the level of assurance. So the eye can very easily see how many each year. Obviously, you can add it up, but it'd be kind of good representation. The actual point I also wanted to make was the level of limited assurance that has been given. It's actually more than double that from last year. It hasn't ended up right to treble. Is there an underlying issue that's meaning we have more limited assurance verdicts given? And finally, linked into that, for the sake of any new members, could you be describe what you mean by limited level of assurance, please?
Well, you're testing me now. I'm not being the internal audit manager.
Sorry, Toby.
Certainly, in my discussions with the internal audit manager, there's no underlying concerns in terms of the numbers of limited assurance audits. It is clear that the number has increased, but we don't see any underlying issue there. Each one on its merits. I'm looking to my colleague here. Where we're
Oh, sorry, I was hoping the key. Scott often puts the key on the bottom about what covers full, substantial.
Yeah, so how meant to, particularly for new members on this particular point in the cycle, how meant to understand those definitions? Because we don't have any training before. Well, obviously I'm not an establishment, so I have some level of understanding clearly, but this might be quite helpful at this point in the cycle beforehand to give, because it's really quite clear understanding the assurance for lots of things. Just want to take away.
I think that's fair to take on board, Chairman. We can make adjustments to the presentations. I think the important point is you've got someone who's relatively independent, still works for the council, but an internal audit manager, and you're trying to take comfort from that person as to what they think is the status of authority. And the limited ratio could be a concern if it translated into the ultimate assessment of the council's control environment. If that was limited, then it'd be right to raise those issues. Of a general, is there a cultural issue, for example, or is there a concern about, for example, the word I've used in my complacency? And that's what we always watch for. We don't want that, of course.
Yes.
So I think the degree of comfort, I appreciate absolutely. Some new members will not have the background in audit. Quite fair to raise that, and next time we can improve it.
Yeah, I think it's worth having that. So basically a high-level number of how many each year, so we can track that, so you can see very easily. And again, in this particular report, you have actually what the status levels are.
Thank you, Councillor. Anyone else? Yes, Councillor Bickle.
Thank you. Sticking with the same table, 5.5, the penultimate row is the percentage of agreed recommendations implemented that are categorised as high priority, and the target of 90%. Could you just clarify, how does that work as a measurement tool? I mean, in 13-14 it was 72%. Is that better than target or worse than target?
If I can, Chair, 72% is worse than target. The target is stated in the level of assurance column as 90%. That's a target that was set by a committee back in 12-13 or maybe earlier actually, and committee have not chosen to vary that target. So 72% would have been beneath target, 91% is above target.
What exactly does it mean? I mean, what does it tell us that's of value? I mean, hypothetically, ideally, internal audit should reaction, look at something, everything should be fantastic, there are no issues. Having said that, I've never yet seen an audit report that didn't find something to say. But ideally, they would find nothing to recommend. Yet at the same time, we've got them under a PI, performance indicator, to deliver at least 90% of their recommendations as high priority.
If I can come back on that, what they're saying is that the recommendations, when audit to do their work, they'll come up with a list of recommendations. Not on every audit, we do have some audits where there are no recommendations. But typically they'll come up with a list of recommendations and they will rank those recommendations as being high priority, medium or low, with the three classifications. So what this is really doing is seeing whether we are focusing on delivering the high priority recommendations as opposed to perhaps the lower priority recommendations. So we're dealing with the more difficult issues.
Right. And on the line below, we've got the percentage of agreed recommendations that are implemented. And we're saying the target's 88%.
There isn't actually a target set on that particular indicator.
Right.
It was an extra contextual information that the audit manager had offered, which has been in this table for a few years now. What we're saying, out of all the recommendations, so the high, medium and low recommendations, 88% have been delivered.
Right. So 12% haven't.
12% haven't. That's good.
Chair, also actually, I mean, it's a kind of time-placing thing here as well, isn't it? Because you could say that 88% have been delivered, but 12% haven't at this point in time. I'd be interested to see if he tracks them any further afterwards. So at some point you would say all of the recommendations all of the recommendations should be implemented, and there's a good reason for them not to be.
I'd agree with you. And I think another factor here is how the calculation is done. I mean, hypothetically, you come up with an audit recommendation, management agree to implement it, they give themselves a target date for next April to do it, start a new financial year. Now, in a report during the course of the year, will that show as not implemented, even though technically it's not overdue? Should the statistic, or does it already just report recommendations that should have been implemented by that point in time, which haven't been implemented? As opposed to those which we never ever intended would have been done by that point.
The recommendations that are measured are the ones that were agreed to be done within the financial year. So those would be 91% of high priority recommendations targeted to be carried out within 15, 16 have been completed. So the ones that haven't, or the one that hasn't, so we're not looking at big numbers of these, will more than likely roll on to 16, 17. But the audit process is that in most cases there's a follow-up audit, and these will be revisited at a later date.
Just one point, just following on that point, it would be useful because the way the statistics lie, that at the end of year 12-13, 79% would be nice in practice to say 100% have now been done. So what we do is, when we look at those figures, we are confident that all the recommendations were eventually caught. Does that make sense? And I'm wondering whether it would, I certainly would like to see that, wow, you know, although only 72% in 13-14 were done, actually all 100% were eventually. And likewise, the 91% that we actually are reassured that actually all of them were eventually caught up. Would it be possible to include that in almost like in brackets or in another line to say, what is that?
Yeah, I believe it would be possible to do. I mean, it's the internal audit manager's report, and I would need to speak to the writer. I can't see why it couldn't be done.
Because that looks incomplete, doesn't it? It looks like, well, I wonder whatever happened to those.
Yeah. But what I can say is that monitoring of audit action plans is undertaken by the Risk Management Working Group. It's a standing item on the agenda of that group. So we look, and from a management point of view, we challenge ourselves, our colleagues, about delivery of high priority recommendations and recommendations in general. And we keep a running list of those. And I don't know how many papers with me today, but the numbers there are very small. So they typically are done, but perhaps at the time.
Just for reassurance, I would suggest that we just have that update that they've actually all been done.
If I may just add to that, obviously in terms of the audits that take place throughout the year, and if you have a look at the audit plan, all of the major systems are done on an annual basis. So they'll be picked up as part of it. There won't be, so for instance in 15-16, within that 91% will be issues that were highlighted from 12-13 just because it's been audited on an annual basis. So that rolls on, if you like. It would have been captured. Some of those ones that weren't done in 12-13 I can tell you over 100% have been done because we've gone from 79
Yeah.
to 91.
It's just how easy is that to capture, just for our reassurance that, I'm sure. Yeah, okay, thank you. Sorry.
Yeah, I was going to
And
say
then on-
something similar. I mean, it's almost if you were to say, it's interesting because we've never had quite this discussion before. We've taken percentages on their face value, but even if you had also the other thing we recommend is a numerical count as well, so you can actually contextualise the numbers. But I think the point is, you could say within 12 months of the original audit, they were closed out. That might be helpful. The other thing is actually, I'll pick up on that point. Yes, some of them would be corrected by the next audit anyway. But what would be interesting to know, I guess, fundamentally, is if any of the non-conformances continued throughout the audits. So you had a particular issue repeating each time. I also had a question. When Scott actually produces his report, are they recommendations, or does he state them as requirements of things to be non-conformances to be fixed? What's that language around that internally?
The language that comes from the internal audit manager is recommendations.
Recommendations.
But there is an expectation that recommendations become actions. So the internal audit team produce the audit, it will have a recommendation, it goes into management, and the relevant manager would be expected to identify actions to deliver the recommendation. That will go back then to audit and to see if it did actually deliver the recommendation.
So that when he does the follow-up audit, then he goes back and he is expecting it to be resolved and closed out. Because basically, like you said, a recommendation is essentially treated as an action, a nature action.
Yeah, if I may, Chairman, culturally, as far as we're concerned, we have that constructive suggestion, recommendation, and we expect as management to act on it. There are very, very, very few which we don't take forward. There will be the odd one. It might be, frankly, a pedantic point that's being recommended. It's not worth it. But by and large, they're recognitions which are taken absolutely, and then we act on them. And our issues to try and get them dealt with in the time frame.
Good. Okay, so that would be some recommendations from the group and about what to do with the table and representatives.
Councillor Fraser.
I suppose I just have one question. What brings about the differences per year in the number of audits completed? You have in 2012-13 there were 43, and then the number dramatically dropped. Well, not dramatically, it dropped 36, 38, and then goes back up to 40. How do you decide what brings about an audit?
If I may, Chairman, there's an annual audit plan produced, and as Audrey has mentioned, that there are financial systems in particular that appear on the plan year in, year out, and those will appear every year. There are other audits which will perhaps appear on a 3 or 4 year programme. Some of the audits, depending on the subject, are bigger in size, so that will have a bearing on the number of audits completed. Also, the numbers completed will depend on the resources available, and over the course of the last 4 years there have been times when we have had less resource available than we've had during the last year.
Where can one find the annual audit plan?
The annual audit plan comes to this committee, it came last meeting, came to January, and we can certainly...
On the website.
On the website. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Just to follow on that point, I note that 45 were contained in the plan, 42 got done, and this is just for reassurance. Presumably they are prioritised, that 45 are prioritised, so the 3 that got missed off weren't actually really important. So they are themselves prioritised.
Yeah, that's correct, Chairman, and that is actually reported to this committee when we come at the last meeting. Yes, they are prioritised, and the audit manager will take the view, and then anything that is left over will be considered for inclusion in the next year's plan.
Right.
It doesn't necessarily mean it will feature in the next year's plan if it's deemed not to be of priority across the board.
That's good.
You're noted the minutes and asked lots of questions on that side.
Just that, in terms of resourcing, it's not just a case of having people in position, it's a case of using that resource in certain ways. So, for example, there are times when I need to use that resource to carry out investigations, which you see referenced elsewhere in papers. They wouldn't necessarily have planned for all of that time. They would have planned for some flexibility, but not necessarily all of that time. And that would depend on the case we get, the investigation we have to kick off. So there's need for some flexibility, there's need for acceptance, if you like, for sometimes not the full raft of audits will be able to be completed, but 42 out of 45 is pretty good.
Thank you. Sorry.
Can I just ask something? So, is this the standard template used by lots of other councils in terms of the amount of data representation that's within that? But that's what we're talking about. Some of it's capture, but some of it's data representation. Really, that's what we're talking about. So, is that what is it? Steve Scott, sorry. Scott uses what is used elsewhere to the same standard, the same detail?
If I may, Chair, I can't answer that categorically. I know Scott will do some work with colleagues. He's an active member of the Midlands Audit Group, so he looks at other data information and the way that's displayed. Certainly something, I mean, I've made notes from the comments coming through this evening. Certainly we will be looking at how others present data to their committees following this meeting. And the other point I just want to make is that we're due to have an external review of our audit effectiveness of our audit systems during the course of this financial year. And I would be surprised if that doesn't look at the way we present information to members. So we will have an external review of that as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, Councillor.
Just drawing on Councillor Pritchard's question, it might be useful for those of us who are new if you could just outline briefly what is the reporting cycle over the year, what other reports would we expect to see during the year. We'll get the new plan somewhere around March, and we'll get an outturn and this sort of plan around now. But are there periodic plans during the course of the year telling us what's happening? And also allied to that, one of the other reports that I am aware of the councils do, and drawing on the previous discussion, is that they will produce a report on significantly outstanding unimplemented recommendations in detail for members, so members can take a view whether they think it's important to delve further into what's happening or not happening, as the case may be.
Typically we produce two internal reports. One is setting the plan and the second one is the review of the plan. But what we also do is, up until this year, we've produced an annual review of the effectiveness of the internal audit as a report to this committee. And that, again, would look at not just the internal audit in the way they go about the work, but also about the delivery of recommendations. We don't produce as much of a routine, an exception report in the way you're suggesting. However, the internal review of effectiveness is being replaced this year with an external review of effectiveness. And we expect to learn a great deal about ourselves as part of that external review, and that will report through to this committee. I think in terms of the audit reports, that really is the cycle. The committee receives a whole host of other reports during the course of the year around the control environment. I'm sure if the internal audit manager was here, he could probably run through those. But if you look on our committee library at the reports for the previous year, it tends to follow the pattern, the types of issues we bring to committee.
So there are no periodic reports during the course of the year saying how internal is doing against its plan.
There's a review report partly through the year.
Sorry.
That's right. Thank you.
Sorry, Jack. When was the last external review? And there has never been an external.
Chairman, if it's a new requirement in part of the public sector internal audit standards. There was a requirement to carry out an internal assessment. I don't think that was an annual. The requirement was to do that annually, but it's something that we've done annually for the past number of years. The new standards require us to have an external assessment at least every 5 years. So we're going into that early in the cycle. So if we're going for an external review this year, and that will, amongst other things, suggest how frequent we need to do that. So it may be that we don't wait every 5 years, it might be every 2 or 3 years. It may be supplemented by internal reviews as well, but we need to get through that external review process.
And how soon would it be that, should the external review request it, that you have to implement any changes? Do they give a set period of time? Is it that year, or is it the following year? Or do they set the parameters?
Sorry, Chairman, I would expect that would be the case, but it would need to be realistic in terms of what we were practically able to achieve. If there was wholesale change needed, then that would need a fundamental review of the way we go about business. If it's minor tweaks, something more easily to fit in.
Yeah, just before we go to Councillor Morgan, we spent half an hour on this, and we are straying all over the place in all different areas, and we are actually resolving this particular annual report back. Just a word of caution that you can speak for as long as you like, but we should be concentrating on our business. Councillor Morgan.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point, Chair, but there was a lot of new members on the committee. I think actually what would have probably been helpful actually is a bit of a primer this evening, and again it's unfortunate that our new Chair is not here, because it's about visibility, and I think what I'm hearing is that people see a need to see where we're going throughout the course of the year. And maybe the Chair, when he's back in, could actually produce maybe for the next meeting such a thing as a very clear pathway of where we go throughout the year. That way people feel they have a sense of direction on the committee.
Thank you, Councillor. I think that's Voice Council. Okay, sorry, yes. No,
Sorry, I promise I'm drawing to a close now. Can I just talk for a second about Appendix A, page 19? As I understand it, this is a list of all of the audits done during the course of the year. On page 2 of that, page 20 overall, we've got 2 income-related audits, building control income and licensing applications and income, both of which only got limited assurance. On page 1, council tax was also given limited assurance. I don't think I'm going to ask anything about those, but I've just made the observation that as members we ought to be concerned about those, particularly council tax. But I would like to ask the Section 151 officer a question regarding the asset register, key controls where limited assurance was given. What impact did that have on the external audit, given the fact that external audit relies on internal audit to an extent? And has it had the effect of increasing the amount of work by the external auditor and hence the cost of the audit?
Okay.
And also what's been done about whatever the issues were?
Yeah. In terms of the issues for the asset register, the asset register, there's actually 2 parts to it. There's one that's the Terrier system that the business team use for recording all sorts of details about our assets. And then there's the financial side of the system. And unfortunately, the financial side of the system has never worked very well. And you'll find that that's not unusual for Daventry, and lots of asset systems, the financial side of them doesn't always work very well. It's a very complex calculations that need to be done. And for many years we've actually used a spreadsheet model and what's the word? Where you check that one system says what the other system says. So
Reconciliation.
Corroboration.
what did you just say?
Reconciliation.
A reconciliation. I'm having trouble with my words tonight. So also they've had a change of staff, and the person who solved all our problems of the system, the external supplier, was very poorly and not in for several months. So with regard to how we do the financial side of things and the reliance that external audit plays, it was business as usual in terms of the spreadsheets that we use. So the external audit didn't have to do any more work, and it certainly didn't cost us any more for the audit. And because of those issues within the system, we've always put extra controls in place with the system that we use. But because also the business team had some changes in staff, there were some training issues as well, which yes, I can help those.
Thank you. Actually, yeah, it's a good point, Roger, in terms of your words. I think the way I understood it when you first said, yeah, about it's not unusual for Daventry, should have been probably not unique to Daventry.
That's the word.
Yeah, please, yeah.
Very good number.
Yeah, I'm not so good with the words. Can I also raise one other point on the audit plan, actually, as a housekeeping? I think, again, in terms of very clear visibility for this committee, it'd be very helpful if we had some extra information on this table. First of all, I think it would be useful for them to have numbers. So we can very easily say I'm referring to audit number 27. I guess they have specific codes, so if we can put those on the table next time, and take that full page for Scott. Sorry he's not here, he's got a lot of feedback this evening. Perhaps that's because he's not here. The second one is actually, whilst this is the audit plan, in actual fact what we're seeing is audits that have been delivered. So it's in a way, it's a misnomer, it's actually audits delivered. And then I'd also a couple of interesting other things. So the date the audit was conducted, the date the follow-up was conducted, the number of non-conformances raised, and then a bit later on it could actually say any corrective actions that have been verified as being completed. It probably has that information already, but I think that might be useful information to have on this subject. I think Audrey wanted to perhaps come back on that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm conscious of the sort of information overload, if you like, that come, and I just wonder about the value of the dates on there, because you have the audit plan of what's planned throughout the year, and certainly if there are any issues with the delivery of that, for instance, like there was in January where they had to say something that wouldn't be done. It's more about what wouldn't be done, as opposed to, I just wonder about the benefit of you knowing that something is
useful
done
information, actually. So you might say, just again for this very conversation, so you could say, I can see this was done on this particular date, I can see there's some non-conformances outstanding, could you give us an update on that since, we're almost closing the year off now, but can you tell us what this issue is? It allows us to scrutinise them in a bit more detail. Yeah, if you can take that back, that'd be very much appreciated.
Yeah, I think there is some value just with regard to if an audit's just been completed and there were a number of action and recommendations coming out of it, we would be chasing people up if they've been done like at the beginning of the year. That may be useful. But I do agree with you, it's about how much information. And how big is your spreadsheet as well, which is a big issue.
The fact is, the information exists. It's not particularly difficult to put on the system. But it's simply titled up so you can see the unit reference number, the audit conducted, the area that was under review, and basically we've got the assurance report, and then just the date it happened. Very simply, what we could simply say, I say this was in July last year, where are we now with the issues?
Happy? Smiling? Okay. So it's the advice is to resolve that the annual audit review 2015-16 and the control issues raised in the report be acknowledged in support of the Council's annual governance statement. Those agreed to resolve, please.
Do we need the presidency?
Your unanimity would be okay to carry on, so if we are in unanimity.
Are we agreed? Yeah. Is everyone agreed? Agreed. Yeah. Thank you. Okay, that's the first one done. Number three, Chair. Well, this rate, that's 45. I will be here probably early hours of the morning. The next one is, just make sure I've got my right numbers. I have. It is to resolve that the approach to information management to be endorsed and over again to Tony.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, we've got to put some of my voice within tonight. Again, this is a backward-looking report advising on what was done during the last financial year. This committee's remit includes the oversight of the way the Council handles statutory requests for information and its use of covert surveillance powers. Section 4, Freedom of Information Act. During 15-16, we saw an increase of requests from 879, rising to 879 from 839 the previous year. 60% of all information requests come through the FOI route, and the remaining 40, or nearing 40%, come through as EIR environmental information requests. Most of the requests are regarding property, and most are dealt with by building control, environmental health or development control. Moving on to 4.3, as I say, the environmental information regs have seen an increase, and those have increased from 256 the previous year to 349 in 15/16. Data Protection Act, during 15/16 the Council received 28 data protection inquiries, 10 were subject access requests, and 18 were Section 29 requests. And this again is an increase 22% in the previous year. So it shows that the request for information is continuing to increase. Data protection policy compliance. A revised data protection policy and manual was adopted by Council during the course of the last financial year. The policy requires audit compliance with the Act, and to ensure any incidents involving breaches of the policy of the Act are recorded. And the incidents for last year are set out in the next section. We've seen, just before we get to the stats, the data protection training is mandatory for staff. 92% have completed the training during 15/16, and this helps with awareness and in fact helps in terms of the breaches which are self-reported. 13 incidents reported in 15/16. That is an increase from 9 in the previous year. The table on the top of page 31 shows where those incidents were across the 3 teams. And the following paragraph talks about the actual incidents themselves. All of the incidents reported were actually given a low seriousness rating, since no personal data appeared to have been compromised. So although the numbers has increased, we think that's due to a greater awareness, and it's not identifying any particular issues there. We've also carried out a series of compliance audits. Last year was the 3rd year of the 3-year programme, and that completed audits for the whole of the identified areas across the 3-year period. Compliance overall is considered to be good. The teams that were audited showed respectable levels of awareness and understanding. Moving on to 4.5, the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act, RIPA. RIPA is something that is very rarely used by the Council. The last formal authorisation was granted in 2010-11. However, we are required to have a policy in place, and we review that policy from time to time. In February 15, it was updated to include a section on the use of social media. We are now giving consideration for a further update to include information on the use of drones. We now have access as an organisation to use of the drone through our community safety partnership. We need to be sure that if we do use that, we use that appropriately. Moving on to information security. I am the Council's Senior Information Risk Owner, CIRO, and I have responsibility for providing a judgment on the use of information business assets, which is used to support the audit process. In doing that work, I've looked at information risk, and service managers review their information risk logs as part of their annual service planning, and I find evidence that the risk logs have been updated and regularly reviewed as part of their work. Data protection, as we've touched on in section 4.4, the number of incidents is up, and again to repeat, these are self-reported minor incidents, and the increase is thought to be due to the greater awareness of the need to report. A data protection action plan has been drawn up, which captures recommendations from the compliance audits and any actions arising from the self-reporting. This plan is also monitored by the Risk Management Working Group. Information and records management refers to what we touched on in the earlier report. Substantial assurance for our information management reporting, and records management is limited assurance. I don't propose to go through those issues again. Senior management team received regular updates from the information officer, which advise of volumes and patterns of information. S&T has recently advised of the general data protection regs, which came into force in May this year, and have provisions applying from May 2018. S&T has called for a further report to understand the implications and to ensure compliance with those regs. The CIRO conclusion, my conclusion, is that service managers and information asset owners are demonstrating identification and mitigation of information risks as part of their annual service planning process, with review and updates as changes occur. Reporting of data protection incidents and the results of data protection compliance audits show a greater awareness of data protection. Progress has and continues to be made in information security, providing me with assurance that the Council is appropriately managing its information assets. So my overall conclusion, section 6, the overall trend of information requests continue to rise. Council is meeting its information management obligations consistently, but there is also potential risk of non-compliance. So with the continuation of compliance audits, refreshed e-learning and risk logs regularly reviewed and updated, any threats to the business assets are likely to be mitigated. So then I ask you to resolve that the approach to information management be endorsed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you. Councillor Morgan.
Thank you. A couple of questions. Really, this is, first of all, to note 4.4 data protection. Again, this is one of those areas perhaps where tabulation would be quite helpful so we can see the trend. And tabulation over the next few years could really help us understand the issue. So you can take, this is your report actually, isn't it, Tony? So you can take, you don't like tables anyway, the next one is, I've seen that the business team and community team perhaps had an issue around lost phones. What's the situation there then? Is it just a one-off or a series of phones lost? What's the reason for that?
I'm not sure. Sorry, Chairman. I'm not sure there's any particular underlying problem there. I think it's a small number of people who have misplaced phones.
Okay, and that leads me on to your team, Tony, the resources team. I didn't quite understand this particular one. So you say each incident was given a low seriousness rating overall. However, misdirected, I think that's misdirected, letters were recovered. It was considered that this type of instance may reoccur due to the volume of personal data. Could you go into a bit more detail on that, please? Are there reactions at all we can put in place to stop that breach there?
Yes, there is an action plan which sits behind this, and there are particular actions relating to this. What it relates to is to letters going out from our council tax section where mass mailing and 2 copies have gone into one envelope. So the next person gets 2 letters. As I say, we have identified that we are taking greater care. There's still risk of it happening as long as it is a manual process. However, we are looking at outgoing mail as a project in itself, and it is likely that we'll be using an external provider who will have more secure systems to deal with that. So we believe that risk will be reduced within that process.
So it's basically literally 2 letters to the same customer.
Yes.
But addressed to 2 different people.
Yes,
yes, you've got, yes, absolutely, that makes perfect sense. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor McBride.
So just drawing on that point, yes, you may be going to put it out to an outside contractor, isn't necessarily the case that the outside contractor will have any better systems. In my previous incarnation as a Section 151 officer at Wellingborough, I had the great good fortune to be interviewed on TV by Anglian News because we'd done exactly the same thing going out to a contractor. Sorry, they'd done exactly the same thing going out to a contractor. So if we do put that out to a contract, I think we need to make sure that the contract includes provision for us to be able to go in and ensure that the right thing is happening. Because the company in the Wellingborough case didn't prove to be particularly receptive to criticism when it all went wrong.
Yes.
Yeah, if I go back on that, the part of the specification of that work includes quality assurance. We are dealing with, in fact, we haven't let a contract yet, but the companies who are in the frame for that are reputable companies who have sophisticated equipment. It's mechanised processes opposed to manual processes. Our problems have come internally from manual processes. It's a fairly mundane activity of folding bits of paper and putting them in envelopes. I think if we can mechanise that process, then that is likely to give us a better result. And I think in terms of another area of the business that I get heavily engaged in with elections and delivering of elections information, all sorts of registration letters, calling cards, we find that we get very, very good response, very, very good quality through that process, and we're looking at similar processes to that.
Anyone else?
Thank you. I've got one more question. You said in your summary and also in the text that the e-learning module has been refreshed. Could you give us an update on what the refresh included? What does it do now that it didn't do perhaps before to make it more effective?
Just generally, if I can come back, it picks up on some of the lessons that we've learned through the audit and the breaches that have been identified. So we can tailor the message. So we pick up on lessons learned.
Oh right, can almost many case studies or something.
I'm not sure it's going to quite that far, but it does pick up on issues that we're particularly keen to deal with.
Good. Thank you. Thank you. Sorry, yes.
No.
In that case, the advice is that we resolve that the approach to information management be endorsed. Agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Next item is to be resolved is to note the report on breaches of procedural rules and regulations and endorse the action taken. Simon,
Yes, a grateful turn, Chairman. Thank you very much. Constitutional requirements report on breaches, and it's a report on myself and Auditor as Chief Financial Officer. It comes annually, and this is for 15-16. Clearly, utopia is to have nil breaches of the Constitution, but I think probably accept you're going to get some breaches of procedures and rules, and these are reported in this instance. There are 3 that were reported for your information. Case details are in there, but really this is about overall kind of volumes. Is there a cultural issue? That sort of question is what you need to be thinking about. And Audrey and I can give you some reassurance on that. But it's also about the actions of management in responding to those breaches. So in particular, there are cases which involve the same team in terms of procurement, and we were keen to reinforce, hang on, 1, the correct process needs to be followed, and 2, do not have this embarrassment again, because frankly it was embarrassing. I think I said that in the report, something very fair. So I think embarrassment can actually be quite a useful device sometimes to reinforce the message. There's also a role for our corporate procurement and efficiencies working group in the system at times, and you'll see reference to them as well. So that's the value of having working groups designed for certain tasks. And whilst it can be very dry to have to comply with constitutional procedures and the like, I appreciate that as the monitoring officer, they are there for a reason. And we obviously need to have a culture that expects compliance. There's also a culture that expects people to feel so they can report and self-report. So that's very important in this context. So between Audrey and myself, we don't have any significant concerns. We reinforcing the need for care, for complacency, that word I've used earlier, applies to this just as much, and also encouraging people to report. There will be times though when we also identify one of the cases where we observed ourselves an issue which needed to be rectified. relatively minor, but it needs to be reported. One thing I will add, though, is given the Council's decision on the 18th of May in respect of the review of the Constitution, where it's agreed that significant breaches will be reported in the future, there may be a difference then in what comes forward. But bear in mind that significant can also be the result of cumulative or several of the same small ones. So it's not to say it's just an individual that's going to be a significant individual breach. But that's the annual report, Chairman. As I say, no particular issues from us, and I'll give you the assurance that the culture is right to actually ensure that we do get breaches remedied once they've been reported.
Thank you. Just one with regard to the sort of philosophy. It's sort of looking through this, it reminds me of sort of broken windows in dealing very quickly with small stuff. So the culture then is that nothing is acceptable. And would you concur that's your feel?
You don't want anything, it's not good to report on such things, but there are going to be occasions when things will get broken. That's inevitable, because there are so many individual procedures. And I mentioned in the council report about even things in committees can go wrong, technically, procedurally, but do they substantively matter? No. However, what we don't want is repeat, and culture of acceptance. No, you're quite right. So when I mentioned those 2 cases on procurement, reinforce the message, and suitably embarrassed with the team concerned. So I think that helps.
And we've had experience this evening of correct procedure, and I feel quite embarrassed now. I had a view of, is this really necessary? So thank you for ensuring I'm on the right one. Councillors, anything from yourselves? No? In that case, the advice is that we resolve to note the annual report on breaches of procedural rules and regulations and endorse the action taken. Those in agreement?
Agreed.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Okay. I'm feeling we're coming back to Tony. Give you suspense for a minute. The next item is that we resolve the proactive approach to counter fraud be endorsed. And Tony,
yes, again. Again, another backward-looking report on our work during 15-16. In the introduction, reminder that this committee is responsible for the overview of the council's anti-fraud, bribery and corruption arrangements. The monitoring officer has the responsibility to review the anti-fraud, bribery and corruption policy, and I have a duty to submit an annual report advising the counter-fraud processes and activity and instances where the response plan has been invoked during the preceding year, and this report sets out to cover those issues. So in terms of counter-fraud arrangements, in September 15, this committee endorsed the counter-fraud strategy as part of the approval route to council, and the strategy outlines the council's commitment and its approach to tackling fraud, bribery and corruption. The strategy has a work programme attached, and a significant progress has been made in delivering the work programme, and the work programme is appended to the document. It is actually the A3 document, it is appendix 1, but they've come through the wrong order in these papers. That shows progress being made during the course of the year. Just with a bit of forward-looking, fighting fraud and corruption locally is a new counter-fraud and corruption strategy coming out of government. This has been very recently issued, in fact a day or two before this report was together. And I just note there that the strategy is hot off the press and will inform future work in this area. So we'll review our strategy against the latest information coming out essentially. So moving on to fraud investigation work during 15-16. During the year, the Monitoring Officer commissioned one investigation, which was relating to suspicion of fraudulent homeless application. No losses to the council were found, no criminal proceedings. The implemented actions were warning of customers and review team practices regarding the data handling. In addition to that investigation, there were further 2 cases referred to management referred to management by the monitoring officer, referred from management to the officer. No, sorry, it's right way right. 2 cases referred to management by the monitoring officer for management's investigation. The first one of those was suspicion of contractor collusion. This was investigated but not proven. No losses to the council and no criminal proceedings. And the second case was suspicion of misuse of work time or falsification of time recording records. Again, investigated but not proven. No losses to the council. No disciplinary proceedings appropriate. However, actions were implemented to affirm staff policies and to review the employees' practice. So those were the investigations. Moving on to 4.3, fraud indicators. The Local Government Transparency Code 2014 requires the council, requires local authorities to publish specified information about resources, and that is the A4 document, 2-sided document, which is appended to the report, and we've done that in compliance with the regulations. Moving on to the anti-fraud, bribery, corruption policy response plan. The policy has been reviewed by the monitoring officer in consultation with the chief exec, the chief financial officer, internal audit manager, and the government and HR management. Although a small number of minor updates were identified, none are considered material or require further support. The response plan was deployed on a number of occasions during the year and is considered fit for purpose. The effectiveness of the response plan has been proven, which governance-wise is reassuring. Then moving on to the conclusions, section 6. The anti-fraud, bribery and corruption policy and response plan have been applied during 15-16. They've been reviewed during the year and no material changes or updates identified. The response plan provides the council with clear systems and procedures to assist the effective prevention, detection and investigation of fraud, bribery and corruption. So I'm, as a committee, resolve the proactive approach to counter fraud we endorse. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillors, anything you want to say? No? Yes?
Well, the only thing I would request is that it talks about on page 46, excuse me, the fraud e-learning. When coming up at the end talking about the training module, I think that would be, it's a fraud e-learning, mandatory for employees and members recommended. That would be put on the seal of time. I mean, I'd be certainly interested in.
So could you, where are you referring to?
Increased fraud awareness amongst employees, members and customers on page 46
Yes.
of 58. You've got experience that's ongoing, but you're talking about doing it for members.
Mm-hmm.
And I just would say, when we're coming up talking about training later on,
Yep.
it would be good if you could put that down as a module. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Well then, the advice is that we resolve the proactive approach to counter fraud be endorsed. Those agree? Yes. Thank you very much. And the next one.
It's forward-looking. Yep.
Okay, fine.
We have a good Thank you. Okay, the advice is that we resolve that members approve the attached annual governance statement to be incorporated within the published statement of accounts 2015-16. That's Appendix 1, and that's Tony, I believe.
That's correct again. Yes, the annual governance statement is a requirement for the council to include within its annual accounts as part of the accounts and audit regs 2015. The appendix is attached to the report, and essentially it's a statement of position. and it's produced following a review of the effectiveness of the Council's governance arrangements and the systems of internal control. And certainly the early reports we've gone through today feed into the production of this statement. Compliance with the Council's local code of corporate governance is reviewed by an officer governance team headed by the monitoring officer. The team meets quarterly to review and highlight progress, identify any further improvements needed for the forthcoming year. It is of note, looking forward, that there's a new local code of corporate some new guidance for local codes which has just been released, and we will review our existing code against that as part of the work going forward during 16-17. Turning to the statement itself, I'll say it is a position statement. It's largely factual about our governance framework. I just wanted to draw members' attention to section 4, which starts on page 55, bottom of page 55, in terms of the review of effectiveness. The first point is actually the bottom paragraph there, which is reminding us of the internal audit manager's opinion on the overall adequacy and effectiveness, as we've heard earlier this evening, and that is one of substantial assurance. Then just moving on to section 5, page 57. Section 5 identifies the issues notes the issues that were identified as part of the 14-15 annual governance statement, and gives a note of actions taken. So at this time last year, identified as actions or significant issues were development of a fraud risk register to inform the counter-fraud strategy, and development of the counter-fraud strategy, which will include actions to further promote counter-fraud whistleblowing arrangements. And we've heard in the previous report that work has been undertaken, and the counter-fraud strategy was duly adopted by Council in December 15. So looking forward for governance issues for 16-17, no significant governance issues that have been identified. However, some opportunities for improvements and to sustain and enhance compliance with the code have been identified and are set out in the bullet points there. Compliance with the general data protection regulations, and that was touched on in the information report. Development and implementation of a local data classification system, that was touched on in the audit report in regards to records management. Development of assurance mapping arrangements which will help identify and close any gaps in compliance with the controls, and review the local code of corporate governance against the 2016 guidance, which I touched on as part of the presentation of this report. So that is our annual governance statement, and devices that members approved the attached annual governance statements to be incorporated within the published statement of accounts 2015-16. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Anything from anyone? So, that's the report.
In section 6, mentions to suggest that there are no significant governance issues. If it's the case that we've only got limited assurance on building control income, licensing income, there was one about the land and property disposals, the asset register, council tax, and notwithstanding the comment by the monitoring officer about you will always get something going wrong, at least 2 procedural breaches. Is it fair to say, accurate to say that we have no governance issues? Should we not make reference to that somewhere in this?
I think Chairman, maybe like the Monitoring Officer and the wishes potentially, and indeed the Chief Financial Officer. I think in terms of significant governance issues, we haven't identified any of the issues you raise as being significant governance issues. I think certainly some of the audits, I know from personal involvement in them, those audits, albeit they produced opinions of limited assurance, or the issues have been, or actions have been delivered since then, so those issues have been dealt with. So in terms of the governance issues, we don't believe there are significant issues. The ones identified have come through the officer group that looks at our local governance arrangements.
Your time, you go for it.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of some of the ones that you've mentioned, for instance, the building control and the other income you've mentioned, licensing. I know that lots of work has been done on that, and where the issues of assurance were raised, we actually put in extra procedures in place whilst that situation was sorted to give us the assurance. And I know that both of those audits have now concluded, and we're in a much happier position. And that should be reported through as part of Scott's follow-ups with the audits, but certainly not of significance, and they've been dealt with.
Thank you, Councillor.
So the thing on that, Chairman, one is that the internal audit manager is part of that group that reviews the position. And bear in mind as well, and this is where the new members are perhaps beneficial, you're probably good self-aware of it more than others, is that the local code and the guidance behind it actually covers a whole variety of, if you like, governance issues, including things like values that the organisation has and it tries to get its partners to abide by as well. So there's ways of expanding, if you like, governance in the widest possible sense, if you like. And if you take it in that context, the need for a focus on specifics as identified isn't so critical. They are taking up the result in other ways anyway, but just bear in mind that wider context for this purpose. But it is for local corporate governance purpose. Your wider remit as a corporate governance committee, yes, you want to look at those things in due course. You have that for the last question.
Councillor, happy?
I'm happy.
You're happy? And you know, I think there is a rub there with regard to, but it's got to be put in perspective. It's got to be put, you know, with regard to where the whole organisation is run. And for me, the important thing is are these recommendations and action plans that are stuck in there to fix the problems. Because in any organisation, we are going to have problems. For me, it's about identifying it and are we putting it right. If that is happening, then we're in an organisation that's fine.
I think you're absolutely right, Mr. Chairman. I think a lot of this, the issue with this particular document is about the underlying governance ethos of the council. And having worked at a number of councils, my initial impression of Daventry are that it's a very well-run council. I've known some light basket cases in my time, but this ain't one of them. I just think it was a question that had to be asked because the dispassionate outsider looking at the agenda as a whole say there are no issues, but earlier on they were finding issues. I think a lot of it depends on what you mean by the word significance and also to what extent there was a culture of dealing with issues once they've been identified. And my first impressions are that there is that culture here, but it was a question which I thought had to be answered.
Councillor, I think you're spot on. It is about that challenging and those views and getting the reassurance, because of course we represent the people who pay their taxes and we need to have that scrutiny, so that's quite appropriate. Yes.
So I think this one all comes down to, it is perception, I agree, and it's also about a level of dysfunctionality. Because actually, by definition, if you were very dysfunctional and you couldn't even organise yourself to have a conversation about the governance, then you wouldn't be in a position to even construct such a statement. But I agree. Having said that, I do think we need to keep an eye on those limited assurance results we saw. And I think we pay extra scrutiny to the statement next year if we see that limited assurance increase, because that may well demonstrate something in the culture.
Yeah, absolutely, Councillor. Absolutely.
The problem I'm perfectly satisfied. Thank you.
Thank you. And oops, what that is now? That is this one. Thank you. Okay, in that case, the advice is that we resolve that members approve the attached annual governance statement to be incorporated within the published statement of accounts 2015-2016 in brackets Appendix 1. Those in agreement? Yes, sorry, thank you. Okay, that completes the agenda items. We're on number 9 now with regard to council development. Talked a little bit, Councillor Fraser-Allen talked about needs.
Fraud e-learning.
Is there, have we captured that? I've got that. Good. Is there anything else, Councillor Morgan?
Yeah, Chair, I've raised this before. I think for people who aren't familiar with auditing, it would be very useful to understand how an audit works, what's audited, what the criteria, etc., how things are classified in terms of assurance levels, how we can make sense of that, and And I know Scott said we do something informal, but I think it needs to be a formal training session which people can be attending, particularly given the gravitas of the situation.
I agree with Councillor, and it's rather peculiar that there are some committees that you can't function on until you've had appropriate training, and obviously planning committee, because it's got a sort of quasi-judicial role. But I agree, I think good practice, and this is where we can get more professionalised, is that whatever committee you're riding on, there is some form of training before you enter the battle.
No, I think, what's the difference between those different assurance levels and who determines?
Yeah, absolutely.
And like, to echo that, I think the e-learning modules, you do a very good one for the elections, for providing officers and poll clerks. That can be done, and it gives people all the information, and therefore allows them to take it forward.
Yeah, I think there are other options. I actually quite like the development sessions because you can actually ask the questions. I think e-learning is very convenient for people who have families and perhaps can't get out so much, can do it from home, and maybe a number of tactics to allow us to inform ourselves, self-inform, and also that can be taken forward. As a more of a general point, looking at all of the committees and whether that's supervised or not.
It's funny, I wrote down myself a note about, not for all committees, but for the Corporate Governance Committee, on the back of what was said earlier, to new members, etc., about the role and remit of the committee, per se. Yeah. And you focused on two issues, but there are other issues as well, which might be useful to bring in. So we'll look at how we can perhaps put this together, and whilst dealing with the two topics identified in perhaps in a little more detail, also touch on the other ones as well, give you a little bit more flavour. And the issue then is about the timing of that, isn't it? And it needs to be at the start-off cycle. So that's the challenge for us, taking this away.
But certainly as soon as we can, from this point forward, if we can get something in before the next meeting, that'd be really, really good.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else?
I asked a question on an earlier item about periodic reports on audit through the year. As well as putting information in front of this committee, it is also a very good training and aid memoir for members as to how the council functions, because the audits are about the various services of the council, but also an aid memoir about the audit process, how that works, how those opinions and verdicts are arrived at, what the criteria are. I would have thought that sort of periodic report would have been very useful in that regard.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't think you can do your job properly on this committee until you have the basic comprehension about what sampling is out and what take place, what's the verdict, etc.
And also a glossary on the language. Because when we used to do surveillance, there was a certain language used to do covert surveillance, and likewise, you're right in the council, all of a sudden we're using terminologies that are actually not understood by normal human beings. So a glossary.
People abnormal human beings.
Yeah. Probably dug a hole for myself there. But I certainly feel that sort of, and also an accessible, something normally you can print it off, and you all of a sudden got a glossary on terminology within various. It's really essential.
That's a very good point. I mean, I could direct some of the questions to the Constitution, because there's various parts of the regulations they have the glossaries. But I wouldn't dare do that to you. I'd rather give you a note separately than forcing you to read the Constitution. It's a good, sensible idea.
Yeah, if it could be part of our website, you go to the glossary, and then for all the different committees, there is the language that is bespoke that particular committee. You can almost see it in vision, can't you? Planning committee, all the different terminologies, and just a brief explanation, so we can.
We can look at website information, but I want to focus particularly in terms of the committee's needs.
Okay.
Yeah, and give what you need the right assessment, the right presentation, so you're confident and thereafter to actually use that information and know what we're talking about.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. Anything else?
No, thank you.
Okay. Any urgent business?
Yes, Chairman.
Okay. Thank you.
Now, Chairman, we have circulated risk management report. I hope you've got that. That's circulated on the 25th of May. Hopefully you've got that. The agenda wasn't able to be changed per se. That's the way it's constructed on advice. That it wasn't able to be changed, but we do need to make sure we have one of the technical things, due process followed, and the way to ensure we can cover this item is to actually deal with it as urgent business. The urgency is some 5 to 6 days old in that sense, but you've got papers as the important part, you've had a chance hopefully to have a look at it, so I would invite you to consider that item under urgent business, which has been submitted in writing to the Chief Exec as per the agenda's instruction here, and is for you to agree, and hopefully you will allow it to be considered.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any comments, any questions?
On the substance
Or on whether it's
yeah,
on, yeah.
we can present it to the Board, Chairman.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll start from the beginning then. And Tony, you're going to...
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Okay, so the advice is that we recommend that the revised corporate risk management policy and toolkit be approved and recommended to Strategy Group and Council for adoption.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman. And apologies for the confusion about the late circulation of this. It could have been held back to a later committee, but it's right to go through this cycle, so you can have a view before it goes to Strategy Group and Council. The role of this committee in respect of risk management is to review the effectiveness of the Council's risk management arrangements. It's not your responsibility or authority to actually approve the policy, but we want to get your views on that moving forward to Strategy Group and Council. Those of you who were on the committee, I think only two of you, unfortunately back in January, will recall that we brought the Strategic Risk Register as part of its annual review, again brought it through this committee to seek views before it went on to Strategy Group and Council for approval. And an issue was raised at the Corporate Governance Committee, a couple of issues were raised to do with the Council's risk appetite and also the profile of risks within its policy and toolkit. That triggered a discussion at the officers' risk management working group, and as part of the planned review of the policy, we gave that consideration and have come back now with some changes. I think largely the risk management policy and the toolkit are considered to be fit for purpose, so the points of issue really are around the discussions that started from this committee. So in terms of the risk appetite, the range within the risk matrix, the risk matrix is actually shown on the back of the papers. The document there, it might be handy just to keep an eye on that. So essentially it's issues relating to that. So the first one was to do with the financial impacts of catastrophic risk. The risk management policy at the time was showing a catastrophic risk having a financial effect of between £1 million and £10 million. The challenge from committee was that that ought to be £5 million or more to be a considered catastrophic risk. The assumption is that anything less than 5 million was thought maybe to be critical but not catastrophic. That was given consideration at the risk management view, and the conclusion of the officers is that a £1 million plus risk is catastrophic, could be catastrophic for the authority, and whilst in terms of the Council's budgets and reserves, £1 million may be able to be absorbed as a one-off. If that was to repeat on two or more occasions, that would become a catastrophic issue for us as an organisation. So the proposal in terms of the policy going back is that the description of the financial catastrophic risk is changed from 1 million to 10 million, as it was written previously, to 1 million plus. So the issue raised by this committee has been considered, however that's the prevailing view is not to take that forward as a proposed change. The second issue, I suspect we may want to come back to this in the discussion, but the second issue relates to the risk appetite. And essentially, if we're looking at the chart, and it's to do with the profile of the risks. And the previously the profile showed an amber in my battleships now, square D1, and a green in square E1. And the proposal is to move those to red in D1 and amber in E1. And that really reflects the profile of risks that fit into those categories. So a little bit more risk averse in that respect, but enable us to keep a closer eye on risks that fall into those particular categories. Those essentially are the changes to the policy. In respect of the toolkit has really just been tidied up a little bit. Previously, it had a long-winded name at the time, I can't remember now, something about guidance, procedures, documents. So we brought it in line with other similar documents within the organisation to suggest it is a toolkit. There's been some tidying up in terms of the language, but the substantive changes to that are the changes proposed to the policy. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Yeah, councillors, any questions? Yes, sir.
Just preliminary. Is this a one-off report, or does this come every year? And what regular reports do the committee get on risk management?
Chairman, if I can, the risk policy, our policies are typically reviewed on a 3-yearly cycle. So this was last seen by this committee in 2013. Wouldn't expect to see it unless there was reason to change in between for perhaps another 3 years. The committee gets a progress report on risk management annually and get to see the strategic risk register annually as part of that approval process.
Right. Looking at the document, he says talking slowly, the risk management toolkit. The final paragraph on page 9, paragraph numbering would be helpful. I hate it when members said that to me when I was an officer. But anyway, paragraph numbers would be helpful. Risk registers are reviewed and mitigation actions monitored in monthly meetings, ... Get the impression that nowhere are they actually brought together. Is there one composite document that says these are all the risk management actions that we are supposed to be taking, so that somebody can actually monitor them, rather as you would the internal audit ones, and say, have they been met or have they not? And then leading on from that, on the following page, we've got monitoring risk management and the role of this committee, which is to review the effectiveness of the risk management framework and ensure that the Council's risk management arrangements are robust. Given all of the above and your answer to my previous question, I don't know that we can do that. We've got information. All we can do is hear officers say, yes, another group of officers are looking at it and they're okay with it. But we don't actually get any information, as I understand it.
If I can respond. Firstly, if I can just take the issues on page 9, sorry, I'm not going to comment on paragraph numbers, but the risk registers are monitored within teams. So each service area has a risk register which sits with their service plan. Those are monitored between the service manager and the manager on a monthly basis. The managers meet monthly with the Deputy Chief Exec, and any exceptions coming through from that process can be discussed there. Risk registers are an issue on the agenda for the Officer Risk Management Working Group, which meets bi-monthly. So any exceptions coming through from service risk registers belong to that group. We have a strategic risk register which looks at the high-level risks across the organisation, and periodically the group will look at the strategic risk register downwards and look at service risk registers upwards to see that their risks are covered appropriately at the appropriate level. So that process happens within the Office of Environment. In terms of the Corporate Governance Committee role, an annual report comes to this committee to provide information on the risk management and internal control arrangements. So we do bring a report to this committee. Committee are invited to endorse the arrangements based on that particular report.
Thank you. Chairman, may I add? First thing I'll say about risk always is part of the day job. Yes, we report to committee, but I wouldn't want you to think we just wait for a committee report to actually produce anything. It is day job. And yes, it is picked up in liaisons with myself and the managers. We do get a schedule of risk particularly needing to be dealt with. And risks can be identified against the risk register and comes back to the committee for adjustment. I appreciate that members won't have all the detail to answer your point about information, but what you're asked to review is about the framework, to be sure there's a framework in place. So, yes, the robustness, and challenge the robustness, and challenge us as to whether we think things are in place sufficiently. The bit we haven't mentioned, but gets mentioned at other times, and I appreciate you members won't have this, but we also have external advisors in respect to risk management, and they give us assurance about it is fit for purpose. So those words that Tony and Julie used earlier about fit for purpose also come from the external risk management practitioners, they're calling that. Zurich is the company concerned. So you can take that as a degree of comfort. I do appreciate more information could be better for your purposes. I suspect you'll develop that knowledge. It comes back to the point earlier for committee development about having some more information before you start acting on committee would be designed. I think that helps reinforce that.
Chairman, sorry if I can just cover another point. The early report, the internal audit manager's report, has a section on risk management, so his assessments a review of the council system of risk management, which we touched on lightly as we go through the papers. So he takes a look as our internal independent person to review on. So that comes through that process.
Thank you very much for the answers. I hear what you say. I'm not at the moment convinced myself that it is effective. Hypothetically, you could have a service that is not acting on its mitigation action plan. I'm sure that would be picked up somewhere by officers. But this committee would have no way of knowing about it unless it came up in the next annual review, which could be 11, 12 months on. If we are tasked with ensuring it's robust and effective, I think we need to be getting information from it. So at the moment, it's day one. I don't get the impression that information is coming to us. I might be wrong.
So I just want to ask you to ensure we're asked to review, which is slightly, I think,
On
the effectiveness of risk
page
management.
10, our job is to ensure that the council's risk management arrangements are robust.
Yeah, well, and that is looking at the process. The problems with risk, and I've seen these charts for me, for my daily life, but my red area was when people got killed. And that was the reality of my world. It didn't mean that my risk management wasn't effective or robust. Normally these things come up is when something catastrophic happens. It still doesn't mean your risk management isn't good, because things happen and you need to respond. What I feel my responsibility is does the council have processes and systems to monitor the various risks in the various areas, and are they looking at these risks and reviewing these risks? That for me is robust. At the end of the day, that's all we can ask then, for a reassurance these things are being done, unless we get into in my opinion, the officers' shoes and do the job for them, which we're not there to do. So, and even with all the data, all that data is telling us is that these procedures are taking place. So I'm not too sure whether that takes us forward. For me, are we reassured by officers? This is my opinion. That there are processes and procedures in place to manage risk within this organisation, and if I'm reassured of that, then I think that we can ask questions and we can probe, and with regard to those processes. But for me, that is ensuring that is understanding that is being reassured. I don't know whether anyone has a view, council, to share that.
Chair, I don't. I do and I don't actually. But that's not the substantive point being discussed here. Actually, is it? It's about the framework, isn't it, in terms of the specific two levels that Tony referred to.
Yeah.
That perhaps does need discussing actually, but maybe not now necessarily, because that's not the point of the conversation.
Yeah.
It's not the objective. Although I'm at a very point
Yeah.
in terms of about how do we know. I understand that point, but that's not the topic of conversation.
No.
Although it's very interesting.
It is. I'd say when I see these charts, I actually get quite excited. It takes me back to a previous life. Yeah. Okay. Any other thoughts? So are we happy to move forward on this? Do we recommend that the revised corporate risk management policy and toolkit be approved and recommended to strategy approved and council for adoption? Are we happy?
Yes, and of course there is another opportunity at strategy to debate it. Of course.
Yeah. With more detail. So do we have agreement?
We do.
We do. Okay. Thank you very much. I have a feeling it's 4:08 o'clock, and we finished. So thank you for your time and for the discussion. Very interesting, and thank you officers as well for giving up another evening.